Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Chris and Andre Show.
You're such an idiot. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Chris and Andre Show. We're super glad you joined us. I'm Andre.
And I'm the idiot.
We're glad you joined us today. We're going to just, we talk about a lot of stuff that, goes on in our lives. And, again, we're going to keep doing this every week. And as we broaden our channels, we get to get people that are dissenters.
Yeah.
Love for everything holy. Tell us why.
I mean, honestly, like, half the reason I do it is for the haters. And we've got a couple of them now that we've talked some smack about Machine Gun Kelly. So if that's what it takes, then, I mean, Machine Gun Kelly sucks. Like,
he still sucks.
He's just human garbage. And not even, like, quality human garbage. Like, this is the, rusted out muffler off of a 79, I don't know, Chevy Nova. It's no good. Nobody wants it except for Olivia Wilde, I guess. Yeah. And tweens. Yeah. But anyways, we're not really here to do it for the haters. We're here to do it for all of you lovely people. But we are going to introduce a new segment as we not because of the haters, but we're just, testing some things out. As you've probably noticed, we're doing more and more clips, trying to provide you some short form content as well. So in the kind of spirit of that, we're going to try this new segment called Quick Hits.
And let's...
All right, that's probably about enough time for me to stick a music intro in there later. So, first off, in pop culture, Eternals. I went to go see it in IMAX. I booked the tickets in IMAX accidentally. I was disappointed in the first place because I knew it was going to be loud, just so loud. And it wasn't that bad in terms of the loudness, but the real reason I was disappointed is because normally that theater, all the other theaters at that movie, Cineplex, I guess is what they call it, have the seats that recline, and they're big and they're comfortable, and the IMAX seats are like, nah, you're paying $20 some odd a ticket and you don't get to be comfortable, at least not that comfortable. They're not like uncomfortable seats, but when you go in, expecting like, honestly, though, probably a good thing that I wasn't in the recliner because I would have fallen asleep about 10 minutes into that movie.
I was waiting to ask you, was the movie at least good?
No, it was terrible. Like, visually, there were moments that were neat, but, I mean, like, I called it 5 minutes into it. I was like, oh, no, there you go. That's who did it. And it just, I mean, it was another one of those films where I feel like they probably had another, I mean, it was like 2.5 hours long, but they probably had another hour and a half of stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor because they couldn't, you can't make a 4-hour movie. Like, nobody's actually, I mean, unless it's Bollywood. You gotta have a lot of dance scenes, which, to be fair, there was a Bollywood dance scene in this film. So for all, I mean, they could have done an intermission. Like, we could have been probably fine with that. But I mean, did I really want to see another hour and a half of that movie? Probably not. Like, I just don't, right. I did not feel like it made sense. A lot of jumping around. I'm trying to be, yeah, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, like, yeah, I mean, if I don't want to just be like, the movie sucks. Why did it suck, Chris? Because it sucks. Like, I'm trying to be honest, but I'm also trying to provide it as like not that the director or Kevin Feige is going to watch this and be like, oh, that's really good points, Chris. I guess I should make my movies better.
But you're part of the demographic, so not to cut you off, but Everything Awesome, which is a YouTube channel I follow, and they do a lot of great reviews about superhero movies. He actually said if he gave his honest opinion of that movie, and he said it's not going to be what people are expecting. So, and maybe I'll share that link with you.
Yeah.
But it was pretty insightful. It's like, it's kind of one of those, it could be considered an artsy movie, but
and that's like, I get that, honestly. You get that sense watching it, that it's
Right.
you know, it's designed to be more of a like an artistic film, but I don't know, like
you don't want that in your superhero movie.
that
right?
it. Well, and that's not even necessarily true. I just don't think it was done well. Like even their attempts to do that, I just think like it's one thing when you want to say like, oh, I want to make it look really pretty. Yeah, okay. Like honestly, shouldn't every director's goal be that their film looks really good? But ultimately, the story is what's going to kind of tie everything together more so, and I think it just comes back to, you know, like character motivation, you know.
We've talked about this a lot. There's a lot of things that Marvel, like for this, and just superhero movies in general, they're changing for the sake of changing them. And it probably, when you introduce a team like the Eternals, not everybody knows them.
Yeah. I know nothing about the Eternals going into this. Like, I mean, I think we talked on a previous podcast episode about, this is not a quick hit. This was supposed to be much quicker than this, but that's okay. But yeah, it just, like, I went into it with not high expectations, but I was hopeful. You know, like I'd heard all of the bad, you know, Rotten Tomatoes and all the bad reviews. I didn't read any of them, but I heard all of the bad press that it had gotten. And I was just like, you know, it's probably, I mean, like Shang-Chi got some bad press, and I really enjoyed that one. So I was like, okay, well, maybe like this will be like that. And again, like there were moments that were kind of cool, but it fell incredibly flat. Like I walked out and I was like, to Christy, I was like, what did you think? And she was like, that was a waste of time. And I'm like, okay, good. Like I didn't want to be the negative one right off the bat, but yeah, that movie sucked. It just, I don't know.
It's okay. That's your summary.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. Like it sucked. That's where I'm at.
That was pretty quick.
Yeah.
So if I see one more article that says get rid of Chrome, I think I might just lose my mind.
And what's funny is that I get it in my Google News feed all the time.
Yeah, every third article is like, millions of users should abandon Chrome right now. For what?
See, I think Google knows that like users will ultimately, you know, resist and rebel, and they'll be like, don't tell me to get rid of Chrome. I'm gonna keep it just because there's all these articles out here telling me to get rid of it.
Yeah, my device, my choice, right? They haven't proven a good enough case to make that true for me. And most mainstream and some up and coming sites, they're optimized for Chrome. So until Safari becomes a better browser in that aspect, and if Microsoft Edge stops trying to turn the Chromium code base into Internet Explorer, like, I'm good. I'm just going to stick with, and I just, like, I had a bad experience with Firefox like 8 years ago. I'm like, yeah, I'll hard pass. So
yeah, I was a Firefox user for a long time. I was generally a Mozilla fan, Thunderbird, and I ran into the issue where it was taking up a huge amount of my processing power just to run Firefox versus what other programs like Chrome would take up. And at the time, I was doing things like heavy Excel processing, you know, even video editing and sound editing, and so I couldn't have my my internet browser taking up half of my CPU power or, you know, my active memory. And so yeah, that was when I think I switched to Chrome. And I do think it's one of those things where it seems like Google in a lot of ways gets a pass as opposed to like Facebook and some of these other companies where when it comes to data privacy and how they're using it, because Google's the one who kind of pioneered a lot of that and was like, oh, come use our search browser and we'll show you targeted ads based on that. And then obviously expanded from there. But I think Google also hasn't had like massive, you know, issues with data privacy in terms of like, people getting access to it, hacks and data breaches and those sorts. And so that's probably part of the reason. But I don't know. At this point, the main reason I'm sticking with Chrome is because it makes it super easy for me to move from one device to another. And I have 3 devices that I'm actively using on a daily basis, minimum. And so it's like, and I can log into any device in Chrome and have all of my logins, all of my bookmarks, everything is saved, the moment that I sync the browser. So it's too easy and too convenient not to be usable. And like you said, there's nothing else out there that's really competition at this point.
Yeah. So next.
So you sent me a video this week. It might have been yesterday. It was like top 10 influencers exposed for living fake lives. And it made me happy in a sense that I'm like, yeah, like I think we should be calling out this stuff. But it also kind of made me sad in the sense that these people probably still have a fairly strong, social media following. In spite of the fact that people have now been like proving that they don't actually live these lives, or to the fact like there was that one girl where it was like she took the picture in business class and then somebody on the flight recognized her back in coach and took a picture, and her fans were like, well, that's just really smart, like that's pretending like you're in business class, but it's being frugal. And I'm like, okay, I guess, I don't know.
It just makes me feel like it's like a cognitive like disassociation to like your own world, and you're trying to really live through somebody else's life, and it just I don't support that. It's just the way it is. And that channel, IO Overload, good Lord, it's like a rabbit hole for me.
It is. I mean, like it's just one top 10 video. But it's 3 top 10 videos usually, like all sandwiched together into one single video, and then you're like, oh, here's 10, actors that had really bad interviews. Here's, like 10 times that characters were written off shows because of off-screen behavior. Like those are the videos that I ultimately ended up watching because I'm a pop culture whore. And
I just don't. I really don't care. So
you're lucky.
Yeah, but I find the
heavy as the crown, her head that wears the crown.
Yeah. That's what we're saying now. I just find it really interesting that all these people, like these quote unquote followers, are just so intrigued with these people's lives. I'm like, I don't even care, I really don't care.
Fair. I'm in the same boat. Like I couldn't care less at this point. So.
All I've got now with sports, let me give I didn't put this in here, but I want to say it. The Broncos won. I'm excited.
I had to wake him up from a nap so he could tune in and watch the rest of the game live.
But I'm still not a Teddy Bridgewater fan.
No, I understand that.
They won the game through defense. They won the game through their run game. It wasn't because of Bridgewater. Nothing against him. He's just not our quarterback. But I'm super excited about the World Cup and college basketball because I've got nothing else left. Although the Broncos may go to the playoffs, but I want to see the Knicks, hopefully, possibly not botch it, but kind of skeptical. And my feelings are hurt because I watched the Denver defense play extremely well without Von Miller. But I'm glad he's happy in LA.
Well, I mean, I heard, and this is obviously just like speculation, I think, more than anything, but that the Denver defense was like, we got to show up and show out because this is the first game without Von Miller, and we got to prove that we're still a good defense and that we're not just one player. I mean, and they certainly played like that.
it was 30-0 until Fox decided that they wanted to show a more competitive game, and without the extent of the fans, which kind of pissed me off. But,
Yeah, I hate it when they do that crap.
Yeah, but then they gave up 16 points. But albeit hopefully in 2022, Sunday Ticket goes free market, and if you're listening to NFL, I will pay for free Sunday Ticket. I will not pay for DirecTV. It's just not worth it to me.
Yeah, they need to get out of that being the exclusive provider. But
Right.
I don't know what the contract looks like, so I have no idea what the actual likelihood of that is.
It expires in 2022, so we'll see.
Nice, that would be fantastic. I mean, the NFL is a bunch of dummies if they don't take advantage of that. Honestly. Right. Speaking of bunch of dummies, or at least a dummy, Aaron, I think I'm better than everybody else, Rodgers. Really, this isn't about, to me, this isn't about whether or not he's vaccinated. And I think, that's a big part of the argument is, people are like, well, I've never seen people get so upset about it, whether or not he got a shot. I don't care whether or not he got the shot. It just seems like dude pretended like he got the shot, got cute with his words, got caught now that he got COVID, and wants to blame everybody else and start making excuses. And I've never liked Aaron Rodgers.
He's in my top 10 quarterbacks. I feel guilty.
No, I mean, he is in my top 10 quarterbacks too, I think. But, well, he was. And I mean, honestly, this doesn't change anything about how he plays on the field, right? But it's just such a, I'm above the rules and I'm above everybody else type of attitude. And it's because I'm smarter than everybody. I've done all this research, but I won't tell you how I protected myself. That's personal. Even though, I claim that I found, a way to immunize people from COVID without having to take a vaccine. That seems like something that a lot of people might be interested in.
So for me, the whole Aaron Rodgers thing, it goes to your points 2 and 4. 1, he got cute with his words, and so that was point 2 and point 4. Point 4, he's blaming everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. And then it circles back to, at the end of the day, I really don't care. And I think it's a misrepresentation of the situation to make it his failure to do something that important. Because I really don't care. It's I at the end of the day, if his team says you can't play, they're protecting that team. Aaron Rodgers isn't paying my mortgage. And I get it. There's a part of me that is frustrated. But then the reason says, yeah, but do you really care? He's a POS for being that guy.
I mean, again, for me, what it really boils down to is I get this wonderful feeling of vindication that I was right. He's always been a weird, arrogant asshole. And so I get to feel good about that and, move on. And that's it.
His PR agent should have just said, hey, let it blow over.
I mean, yeah, I think that's the other thing is, essentially what it really is that he didn't want to deal with it in the preseason. He didn't want to deal with all the questions or, any attention around whether or not he was vaccinated or the fact that he wasn't getting the vaccine. And so he did what he did. And I mean, yeah, if he'd have just said, no, I'm not getting vaccinated. I spend a lot of time thinking about what goes into my body, and I have some reasons that I don't feel comfortable with this, but I'm going to follow protocols. And I think that's the other thing is because he wasn't following protocols, wearing a mask on the sidelines during preseason, wearing a mask during the report. And then he wants to be well, it doesn't matter because they're all vaccinated and vaccinated people can't get COVID, supposedly. He wants to start playing scientist or doctor. And it's dude, just go throw the freaking football. Yeah, right? The less I know about what is going on.
Yeah, let's leave it, because then it becomes the shut up and dribble argument, right? How about we just say, let the team manage it?
I guess that's a fair point.
I look, let the team manage that. I'm going to keep hands off and we'll move on. So.
All right. That was our quick hits session. I think that was pretty successful. We'll find out when we publish it later. But time to talk about some life stuff.
Life.
That's like one of my favorite intros.
Is it really?
Yeah, the business one always like.
I know the business one really frustrates you. We have a couple that are so seldomly used that like I keep wanting to bust them out, but they were ones that like I made just because we talked about a very specific thing that day. Like we have a family one. Music is a good one, I think. Like yeah. Anyways,
I just want to say because it was an issue in the Virginia campaign.
Yeah.
It's an issue in Texas. It's an issue in Florida. Critical race theory, or CRT, is not the issue. The issue is, in my humble opinion, like, can't we just agree racism is a thing, so we can just like stop trying to make something that's not currently in school curricula like the argument? Because it's blowing my mind. It is blowing my freaking mind. It bothers me so. It's like, but you don't know what you're talking about.
yeah.
And
That's the thing that I think I find most interesting is not the right word. Maybe frustrating. And
Right.
it's a common, I feel like it's a common occurrence at this point when having these types of, when you're trying to have a discussion about this and when it boils it down to a stupid back and forth argument, is that people aren't taking the time on both sides to really understand exactly what this is. And it's just a blanket, like, you're either with us or you're against us, you know? And it's like, first of all, what is critical race theory, right? Like, I have heard about it a bunch, but hadn't done much to actually educate myself in terms of what it is until today when I saw that you had the topic on there. And I was like, well, I guess we're going to talk about this. I should probably have some basis of exactly like what this kind of encompasses. And my general understanding is that it's the idea that race, the construct of race, is something that is human made, man made. It's not like inherently, in genetics, something that we can look at there, and that it has primarily been used to suppress non-whites and to elevate white people over time. I mean,
you're not wrong, but that's where the argument comes into play, right? So then you have to expand that umbrella to where is critical race theory even addressed? And it's typically a good majority of law schools.
It's a graduate level college course.
And it's a graduate level college course, right?
Yeah.
So, and the theory is that the systems that we have are the predicate is like ethnicity. I don't even want to say race because scientifically there's only one human race.
Right.
Ethnicity and culture are like, they're non-binary, right? So, and the categories, they're so broad. So that's my frustration. It's like, look, but for a group of people that pretend to be so smart and intelligent, let's just step away from this a little bit. Is it possible, and you can look at redlining as a good example, that ethnicity played a part in redlining? Yes. Ethnicity plays a part in school districts? Yes. Ethnicity plays a part in political districts? Yes. And is there a benefit to one group of people over the other? Yes. And you can like just do a very broad stroke and be pretty confident that that is a thing.
Yeah. The
hard part is, okay, we can acknowledge that. How do we fix it?
Right.
And that's where I get confused. And people say, well, we're teaching young white kids to hate themselves. How?
Right.
The two things can't be true at the same time. Like if you understood what you were fighting against in a a more thorough way, you wouldn't come to that conclusion.
Are kids currently in power in the government?
Are kids worried about redlining?
Yeah, exactly. Like, the whole idea is to basically teach the mistakes that were made in the past so that we don't repeat them in the future. Like,
oh, but you can't do that.
right?
I mean, you can take
no, we can't acknowledge that we've ever made mistakes.
Right.
You know, we talked about that last week, right?
Right.
It's this, like, the idea that of American superiority, that we can do no wrong, the manifest destination, you know, or manifest destiny, where it's like, you know, we are destined to rule this entire continent. This land is supposed to be ours, and anything that we have to do in order to secure it is okay.
Just the, and I'm not anti-American, but I'm anti-stupid, right? You can't have that argument without, if we can't get to, like, actually get into a conversation. The reason why you had to wake me up because on Sunday, because I went to watch the Canelo fight on,
Nice.
And like almost, actually literally 8 miles away from the Virginia border at my wife's cousin's house. Great experience, not a bad drive, but got into a conversation about politics. I didn't want to, but somebody said something abrasively, like, incorrect. And I said, hey, let's reel it back. Can we just agree on the policies? Because none of the facts you're bringing up, or quote-unquote facts, are valid. And I was told to Google it. I said, no, I'm not going to Google it while I'm talking to you. Like, I'm not going to Google your point. Like, you should be able to articulate your point, and I should understand it.
Yeah.
Now I can understand your passion, but I'm not going to Google things you say as you're talking to me to prove your point.
Right. I'm not here to be your personal fact checker.
Yeah. Like, you Google it. If anybody's going to Google it, but now granted the person's younger than I am, and that's fine, but it's like that's our mode of dialogue.
Yeah.
It's super abrasive. It has no.
It's taken on like a form of like, prove me wrong.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, but the idea that the onus is on the other person to prove what you're saying is incorrect. You know.
But we understand, and most people understand. I won't even clarify this or say most reasonable people. Most people having a conversation, you can look at the ones you have with your family and in public life, your private and public life. You will never have a good conversation if you conclude the other person's wrong at the onset.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
I agree.
And I think critical race theory is and we're going to talk more about this later on, but it's become like it is triggering because a vast majority of the people don't understand what it is.
Yeah.
Or is it even threatening the somewhat rigged educational system?
Right. It's kind of like voter fraud.
No, the ironic thing is it does threaten the current educational system, which is rigged, right? Why do we have so many? We have National Hispanic Month, National Native American Month, National African or Black History Month. We have all these because we don't want to give any credibility to the contributions of other groups in this country other than a particular group. I personally think all these months are ridiculous. I really do. I just I don't know which month it is, you know. We try to. It doesn't solve the problem. Having National Native American History Month is absurd. It's absurd. And if you look at the real history of this country and what we did to the indigenous people of this country, to dedicate a month, and I don't know how long it's been on our calendars, we do nothing for it.
Yeah.
We say, hey, October is or whatever month. I don't even know what month it is. Or like National Hispanic Month. So? Black History Month. So? We do nothing to actually address the issues, except for one, like we really concentrate 1 month out of the year for these groups that have been, marginalized. Doesn't solve the problem. So, is critical race theory, does it threaten the system? Yes. Is it being taught to children? No. But can you eliminate CRT by actually fixing the issue? You probably can.
Well said.
Yeah. Let's go to something else.
Okay.
It's time for politics.
So I have stopped watching the news that much. Like I'll do a morning show, like CNN, like New Day, or every now and then, like the Today Show. Have a tendency to listen to NPR, the BBC broadcast, and a couple other things throughout the day. But I'm starting to notice that the media is not helping. Actually, I don't think the media is doing their job, the news media.
Yeah.
And that is my 100% honest opinion. They're just like the biggest perpetrators of misinformation or biased media. And this is excluding Fox or
Right.
anybody else.
Yeah.
It's just in general.
Yeah, the channels that pretend to be unbiased, as it were, the CNNs, the ABCs, NBCs of the world.
Right.
I mean, MSNBC, we all know where they line up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're basically Fox News to the left.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I agree, and I mean, I feel like we've talked around this particular issue before, but I think like somebody was talking, and I can't remember who it was to give them credit, so I'll just take credit for it. I had this idea that
I wasn't even expecting that. I was like, well, that's pretty dirty.
No, but like somebody was talking about the lack of like local journalism, is at least one of the kind of pieces, one of the reasons that we find ourselves in this media kind of frenzy for engagement at the national level, and what it's done at the local news stations now are owned by a lot, the same stations, and so, or the same parent
Entities,
company.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, like, they're all basically saying the same thing. You get the same news story verbatim in some cases, because it's less expensive to do it that way. You pay one person to write it. But it's also a way to, potentially, right, control the narrative or the messaging that is getting sent out to the entire broadcast area that you have a foothold in. And so I don't know what the solution is, because I don't think you could be like, let's bring back newspapers and, here you extra, read all about it. Like, that's not going to happen because we have other sources, but I think we need to find a way to, is there still a desire or a group of people out there that want to be those like hard-nosed local journalists, or is everybody that's gotten into that now just like, no, I want to be on one of the major cable news networks and rake in a bunch of money and get to go to fancy schmancy events? And
Well, I don't know, because I doubt that. I did hear about a story of a Baltimore paper. It's an NPO, and they're going to try to fix it in Baltimore. But what kind of led me to think about that was President Biden made a comment after the infrastructure bill was signed that the media has done a terrible job of explaining the infrastructure bill.
okay,
And I neither here or there. And John Behrman on CNN New Day said, "Why is that our job? And then I immediately thought, like, but you're the same guys that talk about freedom of the press. Your job is to help to hold these people accountable in their positions. So why can't you?
Wouldn't part of that be, explaining to people like, hey, here's what's in this Build Back Better bill, or the
Right.
infrastructure bill that they're getting ready to vote on, that we're making such a big deal about the Democrats trying to get a deal made on this and what it's ultimately going to look like, but we're not going to spend that much time actually talking about what's inside of it. I mean, and I'm with you that I think, like there's certainly part of it, but at the same time, I think the White House probably, their marketing team could have done a better job of trying to, right? I mean, like both
Sure.
sides, but I see, but I totally understand what your point is. Like, that's not our job, or why should that be our job? And it's like, that is your job. Like, by definition, that's what you should be doing here. Is
If you're fighting inclined to get White House press coverage, do a better job.
well, but what doesn't get eyeballs is them sitting there dissecting what's in a 300-page bill, right? I mean, I know you know this. I know that this isn't news to you, but this is where the conundrum kind of comes up, right? This is like, how do we solve this? And
So at some level, somebody's got to take responsibility. If the press, like they ridiculed President Obama's administration for limiting press coverage, they revolted against President Trump, former President Trump. See, just remind people he's the former president, in his attempts to lie all the time. It was a recurring issue of them counting his lies, but they have another clean slate to where they can actually do their quote unquote job, because President Biden has not limited press access as far as I've heard.
Yeah.
So why not ask better questions?
Sure. I mean, that's fair. I think both sides, right, have some culpability in this.
Sure.
And
Sure.
but it would be great to feel like we had that independent media coverage. That, I mean, like, when do you think that's the last time that we actually had that?
I would say Bush.
One or two.
Two.
Yeah.
And the disadvantage he had was it was the start of the Afghanistan war, right? So there wasn't a lot of time to play cover up.
Sure.
And the things that were reported in the news were like current events, and there weren't a lot of extra scandals because there was no time for that. President, and it's not like I'm not trying to, I do watch reliable sources on CNN on Sunday mornings at 11 o'clock, because that is a constant critique of how the news media can be better. I would love to see, Brian Stelter actually bring that up. I watch Mike Smirkanish on Saturday mornings because, again, they're super neutral. I'm kind of getting fed up again with other news hosts on CNN, like Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo. Like, I like them. I think they have good opportunities to do better, or they do a good job of what they're doing, but it's not really trying to ask the right questions sometimes. So,
yeah,
that's my thoughts. And it even it carries over into the Virginia governor's election. Jeez, for everything holy, man. Like, you lost. Math told you that you lose, and I think it was for the last 40 times, there was never the incumbent party in the White House never won the
Virginia governorship. Yeah.
So, number one, let's start with that. Why are you surprised? Right? Number two, you didn't have anybody else new. Like, you're going to bring somebody the Democratic Party in Virginia said, let's run McCarthy again.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's what the Democratic Party does best. Recycle old candidates and just throw them up there hoping that experience will win the day. And I don't know. I mean, like, I still don't really understand how they got out of that habit with President Obama. You know, like, that was somebody that definitely didn't fit that mold. But, I mean, and Clinton, I guess, was kind of similar, right? Like, I mean, he'd been governor of Arkansas, and I mean, but still, like, not, you know, but
the argument still stands. They have no platform.
I mean, I agree. Well, I think yeah, their platform, so to speak, has gotten a little big, right? I feel like to some degree they've got so many things that they're trying to balance simultaneously that they don't have a clear message that they're able to communicate in terms of, like, here's the 3 things that are most important to the Democratic Party, right? Like securing voting rights,
sure.
Number 2 and number 3.
Yeah, because, like, as a citizen, neither one of us know it, right? But I will tell you this. I think that they don't have a platform. So I agree with what you're saying, but I would say
But you would disagree at the same time.
Yes, because that means the message is not getting through, right? They botched the infrastructure bill. They botched the voting rights bill that could have potentially passed.
Yeah.
Because they wanted something more. They don't have a platform. Their platform is everything anti-Trump. I think we all, like most people, would agree that Donald Trump was the worst president in this country ever. I probably would agree with that 40 times more because I think he's akin to Hitler.
Yeah.
But their platform doesn't talk about issues. Like, this guy ran, whatever his name was, he ran on education, and we've talked about this multiple times now.
Oh, Youngkin, the Republican?
Youngkin,
yeah.
He ran on education / CRT.
CRT.
Right? And that was, like, everything else was secondary there. And then this guy McCaughlin says parents shouldn't have blah, blah, blah. And sure, it was taken out of context, but he never, like, he didn't have the courage to, like, clarify that.
Right.
And very forcefully. So that's why I can just say, look, there is no platform. We're looking at two terms of, like, on the national stage of dealing with the crazy, and people should really focus in on their state elections. Like, the turnout for non-white voters in Virginia was lower, of course, because non-whites typically don't vote in, like, off-year elections. Right. So why not? Right?
I mean, you didn't give them a reason to vote, ultimately.
Right.
You didn't communicate the message strongly enough, and you didn't present them with a candidate that they could ultimately feel comfortable getting behind, and so they stayed home.
I mean, we pacified the Trump thing by not reelecting Trump. So let's move on. Let's get something.
Well, we'll see in 2024, since seems like he's. I don't know. I mean, like, I think he's teasing it more than anything, just so he can keep fundraising, and I think I don't know. I don't even want to entertain the idea that he would.
Well, the idea that, for example, to the next point, Joe Manchin is not necessarily the enemy, right? It kind of goes back to point number 1. There's no platform. There is no reasonable expectations. And I say that to say this, because everything that was in the original infrastructure bill, everything that's in the original Build Back Better bill, were all things that the president ran on, President Joe Biden. The problem is the Democrats can't figure it out well enough to pass something. Don't balloon it up to where it doesn't make sense and you alienate people that are going to get these bills passed. So after thinking about it objectively, I was like, well, kind of makes sense, right? These items in the bill were things that the president ran on. He didn't really attach a price tag to it, like, to be fair. And then you have the progressives and the establishment Democrats arguing and adding things to bills that don't make sense. And that's where politicians in general get things screwed up. You eliminate the reasonable people from the equation.
I hear what you're saying. I don't know that I consider Joe Manchin to be a reasonable person. Or Kirsten Sinema, but
I'm excusing Manchin, but not Sinema,
which I recognize. I agree that instead of saying this needs to be an all or nothing, this is our one and only chance to do this, like the Democrats should have taken the opportunity to pass smaller bills periodically throughout the summer and the fall leading up to the elections here, if that was ultimately really their concern. Or if your concern was just actually getting these bills passed, right? Like, but I think part of it was a play that they thought we're going to make it look like the Republicans are the only reason we can't get this done, and that will convince people that we need more Democrats. I don't understand the media's reaction to everything with the loss. I got to double back on the Virginia thing for a second. But I don't understand the media's reaction to it, where it was like, oh, the sky is falling for Democrats. Like, it didn't change the numbers in the House. It didn't change the numbers in the Senate. Like, it didn't do anything in terms of impacting who they had available to them to get to vote for the legislation that they want to pass. So they've still got 12 more months before there's another set of elections. Like, right? Am I wrong to feel that way?
I don't disagree, but I think the media is chasing headlines in the wrong place.
Right.
And that is just not helpful.
It would be, and I think they don't know, like, they don't understand how to go back to reporting normal stuff. There is, like, it's, they've opened Pandora's box in terms of this 24-hour cycle of news, and the Trump presidency didn't help, because all it did was, people like me would flock to videos just to watch him say ridiculous things. So, because it was like, I can't believe that we have a president who does this, like,
you should drink bleach.
Yeah. I was having a really hard time not engaging with that stuff for a really long time. It's nice now that I don't have to see as much of that. Like,
so that's a fair point. They haven't figured a way to go back to normal and boring. Right.
Right.
That's probably a factor, but it just kind of,
that's where your news organization can't be exclusively built on profitability.
Sure.
like it can't be, we have to raise profits at all costs, like that I just don't think is a recipe for success. Because ultimately you find yourself in this place where now you're manufacturing news, where you're generating headlines that aren't necessarily as accurate as you'd like them to be. Right?
Like Ted Cruz, amplifying Ted
right.
Cruz going against Big Bird.
To be fair, Big Bird is obviously a communist. Like, obviously, who wears that much yellow but a communist? Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that when you look at
but the left is the cancel culture, like they're the ones that have the issue with cancel culture. It's not the right. I love that the conservatives now, or the GOP now, have tried to co-opt that and are like, oh, you want to get offended about just anything? We can get offended about just anything. We'll just make stuff up to get offended about. Like, oh my God.
Well, but you can't go run around saying stupid crap like defund the police.
Well, you're not wrong. I kept sitting here trying to think of other slogans. Like Black Lives Matter. We've talked about that one to death. Build Back Better. Maybe we should stop using that.
I don't think people can people conceptually can't wrap their hands around the abstract, right?
Sure.
And these catchy slogans, like that only works for like Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and Burger King. Like, you're not trying to sell somebody a burger. So,
No, we should call it the $3.5 trillion infrastructure, internet, roads, bridges, you know.
But the good thing is we can finally have Infrastructure Week, and I want to give President Biden a couple I see what you did there. When he actually opened up his speech after it was signed and said, "Now we actually have Infrastructure Week." I was like, "Yeah, I see what you did there." And then secondly, somebody tried to call him out on, and then I'm done with politics. So there's a news story. I don't know if you saw it, that the government was going to pay, in what was in the headlines, $450,000 to families where the U.S. has misplaced their children.
I had not seen that.
And a reporter, I want to say he was from Fox. I can't remember his name, but I'm pretty confident he was from one of those. Like, he was from Fox. He actually said, he brought that up. And President Biden made a very interesting point, very good point. He said, look, yeah, they came here illegally, pretty much, right? But we lost their kid. We got to make that right. You know?
Yeah.
Now, me, the little guy in my little world, I'm like, yeah, if you lost my kid, like, first of all, 450 doesn't like cover it.
Yeah.
Like, that's an ass whipping. Like, I'm coming for you. But at least we can show and give them some sense of dignity and hope that it doesn't have to be terrible, right? You didn't lose their phone.
Right.
Like, you lost their kid.
Right. You have to acknowledge that we made a mistake, which again comes back to this idea of American superiority, right? Where it's like, well, we didn't really, is it our fault? No. I mean, if they hadn't shown up in the first place, we wouldn't be in this position, you know? Which is, I mean, when you're having to make that argument from that standpoint, you should know that you've already lost. Like,
right.
You are responsible for your own actions, regardless of what other people do to provoke you.
And I'll be honest, he was pretty forceful with that reporter. And I'm like, yeah, I still think what kind of led me to that was he's a gangster, number one. But the leaks about how Biden talks to his staff.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I think we had chatted about that over text a couple of weeks ago. But yes, like, it's just so much profanity, and to be a fly on the wall in those offices, because I'm sure, like, with all of the stuff going on with the Build Back Better and the infrastructure bills, like, he's sitting there trying to get this stuff passed, and he's like, what the actual F is going on? Like, what are these a-holes doing? I don't get it. Just, and I mean, like, I don't know.
I can respect that, you know?
I can, yeah. Again, like, Biden probably wasn't my number one. Like, you give me anybody in the world that I could pick to be president or our presidential candidate, Biden probably wasn't it. But considering what he stepped into, I think it's pretty amazing the lack of credit he's gotten for the first, like, 9-10 months, you know?
And people forget that.
Again, like...
That in and of itself is frustrating. It's like, yo... if it was like a whole year and he hasn't accomplished anything or tried to accomplish anything, I'd be like, yeah, okay, he deserves that. But can't we all agree that we were just saying, like, 11 months ago, this is the end of the world?
Yeah. Exactly. All right, we're moving on from politics.
Oh, gosh.
Your favorite.
Collaboration. Synergy. Thinking outside the box. Raising the bar. Breaking down silos, shifting the paradigm, disrupting the market, business.
God.
The bongos in the background are always one of my...
Yeah, so I'm trying not to... here's my only disclaimer.
Okay.
My wife, we were watching the news about, like, you sent me the text about what happened in Austin. It's on the news all day throughout the weekend, and like Sunday, I actually said it just came out of my mouth. I really don't care. right? And my wife said, "Hey, don't lose your humanity," right? And I tried to actually kind of defend my point. I'm like, look, there are other things where, yes, this is a tragedy, but there are other things that I think the national news should be like highlighting aside from that, right? We're not going to get any information but to give me 20 updates. And she's like, no, that's great, but don't lose your humanity. It's okay. So that's my disclaimer. I'm trying not to lose my humanity.
Having said that, here
having
comes the
said
humanity losing statement.
Yo, screw Facebook.
Aw, Facebook's not human. Don't worry about that. You're not losing your humanity there. Mark Zuckerberg's a robot. Like,
have you seen any of their commercials?
So I've seen. I saw a couple of them where I don't even remember what they were about. I want to say that they were like their privacy or security like commercials that they were running for a while. But are there new ones that they have out now?
So they've got this whole series where it kind of in short form, it's basically the internet has changed over the last 20, 30 years when 230 was written or passed, right?
Really?
Don't you believe federal regulation should change also?
Oh, okay.
So that little catchphrase in the bot at the end, it makes me think, and not just Facebook. There's a lot of companies where it's like, so what you're telling me is you're not going to do the right thing. You're going to wait for the government to tell you to do the right thing.
Right.
That is completely unacceptable.
Agreed.
And I think the government should rip Facebook a new one. I think any company, that waits for regulations is the exact opposite of what an open market capitalist society should be like supporting. Like, I don't need you to tell me the difference between right and wrong. Inherently, I should know that. At a base human level, I should know the difference between right and wrong. And it makes me just that much more angry with Facebook. It makes me just that much more angry with any company that says, I know it's wrong, but I want the government to regulate me.
Yeah.
Because as long as I can get away with it, I'm going to keep doing it. Why does that make sense to anybody? How can anybody watch that commercial and not take away that message?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stupid people out there, so I won't discount that. But I mean, I don't know. I think mostly Facebook is hoping that people aren't paying attention. I mean, like we talked about it a couple of weeks ago with like the This Week in Google podcast, where the cost of switching for Facebook is so high because you can't trying to get your friends to leave Facebook too, right? And to go somewhere else, whether it's to an email chain or some, private platform, to be able to have that same ability to share it's not easy. And so that's a huge part of it. Even people that leave Facebook to take social media breaks come back because it's like, well, I felt disconnected. I didn't know what was going on. How many times? Oh, did you see this on Facebook? Oh, Jenny had her baby, and it's like, oh, I had no idea. It's like, well, obviously you and Jenny aren't that close then. Like, she didn't text you. No offense. And I guess like that's kind of the approach that I've taken lately with Facebook and social media in general. Is it's like I don't need an app to regulate and moderate my engagement with my friends and family. Like
I just can't. I can't, and I'm trying not to lose my like
humanity.
Humanity. I will tell you that hurt me a little bit. I'm like, yo, are you saying I'm becoming cold? Well, I'm not. But it just blows my mind. Like, so I've been watching or listening to a lot of CBC Marketplace, which is a Canadian show. They have a lot of interesting things on YouTube. That show does not survive in the U.S., to be honest with you. They rip companies apart. But it makes me think even the companies in Canada, and I used to think Canada was probably more, well, yeah, the stereotypes are all nice. And no, they're waiting for a province to fix something that's destroying like thousands of Canadians. And it's like, why would any company, how do you support a company that takes advantage of people? Like, how is that okay?
So this isn't on the list, but I saw this news story where like one of the most holy rivers in India is currently covered in toxic foam due to some chemical plant up the river that has been releasing wastewater into it. And like they had videos of people trying to paddle through the river on, you know, their little boats and like having to pull their feet up so that they don't touch the foam. And then they had like one of the cattle like just sitting there with like foam all over its mouth from drinking from the river and stuff. And I'm just like, if you're that company, like how do you justify that? Like, not only is this probably obviously a water source for some animals and probably humans, but it's also considered one of the holiest rivers in all of India.
Right.
And you're just going to dump your wastewater into it and create toxic foam. Like, cool.
Brother, I can't, man. I just think that if our compass is that off, there's something deeper that's wrong. It's just like it blows my mind. And like if you've never, for people listening, if you've never watched those like Facebook commercials, just watch one or two. And like the part that blows my mind is it's not the content from the start to the like, I guess the end credit or the little bumper they put at the end.
Yeah.
But the end, it always says the internet's been, you know, blah blah blah. And don't you think regulation should change? Well, if they do change, and you guys are knowingly toxic to children, knowingly toxic to democracy, we should put like the last nail in your coffin.
Well, that's what I don't understand. Like, what do they want the regulations to do to come in and make it okay for them to do what they're doing, essentially, right?
That's the question, right? So it just blows my mind.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. So we had the OSHA testing and vaccination mandate that President Biden and his White House have issued, basically saying all employees at companies of 100 employees or more need to be vaccinated or offer daily testing in order to have their employees, not even necessarily have them back at work, right? But just for them basically to be open, or they face fines. A court has blocked this ruling temporarily, but you know, whether or not that goes through, I thought it was kind of interesting just in terms of like how much of an impact this would actually have. I saw some headlines that were claiming 84 million workers, you know, would be impacted by this. I'm curious, like, are half of those people already vaccinated, right? Or is this 84 million that are unvaccinated? That part I didn't really get. And then I started digging into just thinking about numbers, right? I mean, at our time at E Area, company size was something that was always very important to us on the production team. And we had a lot of people that listed their company size greater than 100 plus, but we knew that was crap. And so I was just like, well, what does the landscape look like right now? I think the most recent data that I could find from the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council was from 2018 that was saying that 98.1% of U.S. employer firms have fewer than 100 employees. So basically 1.9% of U.S. employer firms are 100 employees or greater. So less than 2% of all companies ultimately would be potentially affected by this mandate. What was the other thing? Possibly, right? And then employer firms with fewer than 100 workers employed 33.4% of the total workforce in 2018. So, I mean, you're already looking at a third of the employee pool that is not affected by this. So I don't know. It was just kind of interesting.
Well, when I saw that, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. It doesn't. But the thing with the firms that would be affected by it is that the other ones would follow it, which is typically the norm.
And I'd also be curious, not to cut you off, but just how many of these firms already have vaccine mandates in place, right?
That's my point, right?
Yeah.
They like for the small business owner, they're like, yeah, I can't afford to be closed.
Sure.
So whatever prevents me from being closed, we're going to do that. So yeah, it's like that's another Pandora's box. I don't see the logic in a judge putting a stay on that order, like, to be honest with you, because then that means there's a lot of other things with OSHA that could be impacted by that. So they're going to write a precedent they necessarily don't want to do.
The idea that, a lower court would issue a stay on the vaccine mandate, but the Supreme Court won't issue a stay on Texas's abortion ban. Like,
hey,
now granted,
my body, my choice.
Yeah, and granted, like, I do think that based on the initial hearings and stuff like that, and the way that the justices were kind of positioning, like, there's a really good chance that they're going to sit there and say, there is no way in hell that we can let this stand. Like, it essentially creates a loophole around judicial review of legislation by making it that the government is not the enforcing agent. And if that's how states want to pass laws from that,
Yeah,
I mean, what's to
Second
stop, California from saying, okay, fine, like, you can't own a gun, and if you do and your neighbor reports you, you're, going to get a fine of $1 million.
Right.
Like, I mean, First Amendment, right? You can't say anything about this, or if your neighbor, is offended by it, they can sue you for $1 million. Like, I mean, Third Amendment, right? The Army's going to sue you because sorry.
Trumpism at its worst is on trial in the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But I think you're 100% right. I mean, we can agree that, like, close to 60%, and depending on whichever report you get, more Americans work in a small business than a large company.
Right.
So I don't dislike the strategy of actually putting that mandate in place, because those same companies are like, they fall under OSHA regulations pretty heavily.
Right.
Now, smaller companies, depending on like OSHA, like whichever like OSHA thing you're looking at, could also fall under those also. But it's trying to solve a problem. And I'm not going to get into it. Like, if you don't get vaccinated, that's on you. If you go to the hospital, that's on you. If you die, like, you had an opportunity. And that sounds like, again, my wife said to me, don't lose my humanity. So,
no, but I mean, like, what we're supposed to feel bad for everybody that
I don't, that
wanted to believe not science. Like, I'm sorry. Like, no, I'm not sorry. I'm not responsible for your inability to make that decision, or for the decision that you made. Like, it's not even your inability to make a decision, but, like, I'm not responsible for the decision that you made. And so I don't, it's like, I'm not happy, right? I'm not gleeful when people that chose not to get vaccinated get COVID, or God forbid, pass away from it and die. Like, but
what's the extreme of a circular argument, right? Like, whatever that may be. It's like, look, you can't have it both ways, where you make these declarations of my body, my choice with a vaccine, but we demonize people that get abortions. You can't make it, you can't say Second Amendment rights, but, I got to worry about my kids going to school or being in public because some idiot may have a gun, and you don't want to have, like, tougher, like, just qualifications to own a gun.
We're not asking you to give up your guns. We're asking you to allow us to prevent people that shouldn't have guns from getting them. That's it.
It's all about common good.
Yeah.
Like, you can't say this is a country like that is the foundation is liberty and individual freedoms. At the sake of what? That's the question I keep asking myself lately. I'm like, at the sake of what, though?
Sure.
Right?
Well, it's like, I mean, what is it? The Patriot Act, right?
Yeah.
That they passed during right after 9/11, where it was basically like, nah, we got to figure out what's going on. If we don't have access to everybody's information all the time, then we might miss another one of these terrorist attacks. And that wasn't some bill that they made up all of a sudden. Like, that's something that had been sitting there. They were just waiting for the right opportunity to pass that through. And we're still dealing with the fallout from that. Like, so, I don't know. I just think it's another one of those things where I'm with you. I'm glad that they're doing it. I understand why they're doing it, the way that they're doing it. I just wish that there was a more, I guess, a more honest, kind of conversation about it in the media. That's what I think we're really kind of missing, right? Is just a level of honesty that isn't present, and I think it's not there amongst the hosts, it's not there amongst the guests, the panel.
Right.
Like, everybody seems to be on the same agenda or under the same understanding of, well, this is entertainment and we got to make a show out of this, so we can't all be on the same page. I'm going to call you a name that you won't like, and you can pretend to get really offended by it. Like, it's like you had the Kevin O'Leary, right, was on the New Day on CNN, and I saw the name and I'm like, why do I know that? Why should I know that name? And I'm like, oh, Shark Tank. He is my least favorite, probably, host from Shark Tank. But
I like him 50-50.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I listened to the clip, and
So you heard his back talk, right?
Oh, I don't know if I...
So his back talk was, people are incentivized to stay at home. They projected 14% of their employees were not going to return.
And they're looking at like 55 or something
55.
like that, right? Yeah. Which I was like, okay, so how do you explain that? Like, what?
He did,
but he said not return to the office, meaning
the office.
I understood that to mean like, we're only really interested in remote work kind of.
Yeah, but
right?
So that's the thing. It's like you can't have both, right?
Yeah.
So you can't be. All right. So Mr. O'Leary, you're not wrong, but you're also not right at the same time. Like, it can't be both. And we have said on this podcast time and time again, people don't want to work at your crappy jobs.
Right. And that's our fault, apparently. Like, it's our fault for not appreciating the crappy jobs that are being offered. Okay.
Why can't we just call that for what it is? And the reality is, like, people don't, like, dress it up however you want to. There's things that are lacking at your company. Like, and that's it.
I mean, ultimately, like he was talking about, right, it was accountants and something else. There was another category. But those are people who don't need to sit in the office every day.
Right. For what?
Like, that's overhead that you don't need. I don't understand why companies feel like they have to have, if I don't get 8 hours of, my employees' time, because it's not even 8 hours of work, right?
No.
It's just, if I don't get 8 or 9 hours of my employees' dedicated time in a building where I can supervise what they're doing, then I have no faith in their ability to get their job done. Dude, your hiring practices suck. Your training program sucks. If that's the case, like, you obviously don't understand what it is that you're supposed to be doing. These people don't get their jobs if you're that concerned. If having them on premise, I mean, people are, I feel like most people are so much more efficient when they get the ability to intertwine their work with the rest of their day, at least occasionally. Like the ability to be able to step out of the office for an hour to run an errand or to do something in the middle of the day and come back and pick up where you left off. Like, I
don't need somebody over my shoulder telling me to do my job.
Yep.
Right? If you want to stifle innovation, make people fit in that box you prescribed for them.
The cubicle, literally. That was what he was talking about. Like, people who worked in cubicles don't want to come back to the office. And I'm like, no, like, where have you been? the open concept office has been around for a while now, Mr. O'Leary. Like,
and even that's like too much of a hassle.
well,
right?
yeah, because it's not any better, right? You're literally taking down the walls, and all you do is now I have to look at and listen to all of the annoying coworkers that I have.
Yeah, it's like, gosh. So
now I have to actually see all the people I didn't see all the time. Oh, it's terrible.
I just thought that was like and again, I'm like a 50-50, like all of his deals are done in perpetuity, which are most of them. And I get that from an investor standpoint. I don't get that as the one that's selling equity.
Yeah.
So that's a fundamental and an ideological difference.
I did
Anyway.
like that the host in that segment called him out on the stimulus checks. If he was like, those employment benefits ran out several months ago.
In September. That was John Behrman.
Yeah.
Gosh. I have a love-hate with him, the whole Boston Red Sox thing. And
is that it, though? Is just the Boston Red Sox thing?
that's the start.
Okay.
So it's,
Okay.
It's always the start of
No,
it.
I understand. That makes sense.
But anyway, Johnson & Johnson, they are... I don't know. I don't even know how to like start
This story was one of those things like I thought I had heard something about this, and then I don't even remember if it was in my Google News feed or just I think it was one of the videos I saw on YouTube because I was watching some other Daily Show stuff, and this popped up, and I was like,
I saw that video. And I
what
was like,
the F? And I mean, that's the stuff that you were selling to put on babies. Like, you told people to put it on their sensitive parts and knew for 50 plus years that it had asbestos in it and was causing cancer, and you did nothing. Oh, but let's go get the J&J jab. Like,
yeah, you can't say that because I actually got the J&J shot.
well, I'm sorry, Andre. It was
I'm
nice
worried-
knowing you.
I'm worried about my wings sprouting in,
Seriously. No, I mean, I like, look, I get that there were times where there wasn't that level of oversight and regulation, but I think like this is part of where people get frustrated with the less regulation argument, where it's like, look what happens, like these companies are hiding this stuff even with regulations. Imagine what they do if we got rid of them. And
but it's also a moot point because they can move their company, they literally to Texas,
right? Yeah,
and beyond a rebrand, just say no, we're not responsible for that, and then file bankruptcy.
yeah. And Johnson & Johnson's
No.
not the first ones to do that, right?
Right, they're not.
Yeah.
So that's the part where I keep saying, look, let's focus on the bouncing ball on that sentence and
Yes.
fix that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because ultimately, like, yes, they messed up. Yes, they hit it. But they were going to have to pay for it until they moved to Texas. And by the way, Texas, like, dude, get your shit together. Like, you cannot be the, like, get out of jail free card for corporations. Like, it's not.
Delaware is also. So
Delaware too. I'm on both of you. Like,
that's a slippery slope.
it is, but I'll slide right down that slippery slope.
And so if you bring that up, I got to bring this up. So Ted Cruz, in front of a bunch of children,
Yeah.
says that Texas, we're not at a point to where we secede from the union,
No.
which they technically cannot do.
Sure.
But they can actually turn Texas into 5 smaller states.
I would love to see that.
And actually, I was trying to do the math today on that. When I followed up on that story, I'm like, oh, really? And that means actually, the reason probably they won't do it is because Republicans, again, will lose control of Senate seats.
Right. Yeah,
Like,
because
it
if you break it
kills-
up into small... I mean, it's the same thing with California, right? The Democrats aren't going to break California up into multiple states because Southern California is a bunch of conservative assholes. Like, and Northern California is a bunch of conservative assholes. Like, you just have San Francisco that outvotes everybody. I don't know.
Well,
I'm
like you're...
I'm not that wrong.
Yeah, you're not that wrong there. But I think even then the Republicans would lose. Like, That's it. Goes back to focus on your state elections.
Yeah.
Like that, like state and local. Those should be probably just a little bit more important than national.
Hey, I got 2 out of 3 of my local elections right when I guessed.
Oh yeah.
That's what you do when you go to vote, right? You're guessing who you think is going to win.
No,
It's like the lottery.
It's not the lottery.
I think the numbers are going to be.
So, and I told you, like, it's beside my wife reminding me to vote, and I already did. Like, my little city, it's not technically a city, is super democratic, which blows my mind because every now and then I see a lot of, like, Trumpers.
Yeah.
Which actually fuels my theory, and I could be wrong. So, in a couple years, I do believe for the next 2 national, like, election cycles, we are going to have to deal with Trumpers.
Yeah. Until
They're
they stop
just
making
not-
flags.
They're just not going to make it. They're just not going to. It's just not possible.
Good.
Uh,
So I have a quick Trumper story to add.
Okay.
Since we brought it up, I know we're not in politics, but my kid had a birthday party she got invited to this weekend, and I took her over there, and the parents were like, "Oh, well, you want to come in? You want to hang out?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Like we had gotten there a little late, and so she wasn't going to stay there super long. And I was like, "Yeah," and they're like, "Oh, we got pizza and ice cream and cake," and I'm like, "I can't eat any of that."
And a Trump flag.
And yeah, on the back porch, they've got multiple Trump flags flying. And it took me a minute, and I saw it, and I just was like, oh, man. They were perfectly nice people. Like, and I know that that's the whole thing, right? Like, just because you fly a Trump flag doesn't mean that you're a bad person. I get that this is a really weird political time that we kind of live in. I wish people had a little bit more clarity, maybe, or whatever it is, a little bit more discernment when it came to who they were supporting. I'm not saying you should all support Joe Biden, right? Like, but I'm just saying you've kind of hitched your wagons to the Antichrist. And
He's worse than Hitler.
yeah, I mean, like, I don't get it. I'm sorry. And thank God politics never came up in like the hour and change that we were there. And, like, I don't know, Helena has a lot of fun playing with their kids, and so I'm not, like, opposed to having play dates and stuff, but it's also just kind of like, man, come on.
I think
I just want to make a friend.
I don't know, man. I kind of, even in the argument I was having, and these were, like, family members,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, look, I'm not saying you're wrong. Like, I'm literally not. I'm saying, like, but what's the basis of your argument?
I'm saying I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying what you are arguing on is wrong. Is false.
No, or it's got a lot of gaps.
Sure.
Like you can't. It's got so many gaps where I can't be. I can't sign onto the whole thing.
Right.
Right. And a lot of the people, what I'm starting, like, my summation of people that vote for Trump is they're voting for the ideas, not necessarily the person.
Sure.
And I heard the best. I was watching this thing on. It was on. I want to say CNN. Yeah, they were talking to an attorney that is representing that Wittenhouse kid.
Mm-hmm.
No. Actually, the Michigan militia people.
Oh, okay. The ones that kidnapped the governor.
They were planning on it, yeah. And he actually made a good point, and it's been kind of ringing in my head. He said, if you come to Michigan and you look at our landscape, and your dad could probably relate to this, right? Not on their point of view, but
right.
He could relate to the scenario where they look back in the past and they saw that American dream, and now it's changing, and they're like, everything's changing with or without them, and you're forgetting me, and it makes that dream that much further. And he actually said, but the people that are on the opposite side of that conversation in Detroit or Lansing or places like that, they're like, that's cool, but we want to be a part of that.
Right.
That is where the friction, like that's how people get radicalized in this country, where like white people, and I'm not demonizing white people, but in people that live in these particular like areas where it's now becoming a distant memory. It makes sense. Like logically it makes sense. I'm like, oh, that was something that was attainable that's now moved beyond reach, but you're targeting like people that don't look like you because you're saying it's their fault, without even remembering that, well, if you go to Detroit, you've got a bunch of abandoned buildings.
Right.
And the people on the other side are saying, yeah, but we want to be like part of the things that, and it's that disconnect. That's where the media can do a better job.
Sure. But part of it, right, is that I think people don't, it's like this glorification of the 20s and 30s. The 1920s and the 1930s. It's like, oh, the flappers and all this stuff and prohibition. And it's like, okay, yeah, like that's great. If you were not white, it wasn't great. Like that time probably kind of sucked, right? Like
actually, that's not true, because that was the Renaissance of Harlem. That was that's when you have
maybe even more of the 50s and 60s.
Right? Yeah. So if you go, but that brings back the CRT argument,
right? Well, and that was the whole thing that was part of Glenn Youngkin's like argument was, I want the Virginia of my childhood. I want kids to grow up in that, and like I understand exactly what you're saying, like that yearning for nostalgia, for that simpler time, for kids being able to go out and play in neighborhoods and not worrying about it. But it's like, dude, that's a box that's been open. Like that cat is out of the bag. You're not going to get that, but you cannot roll back the time on that. That's not, I don't think that's something that you can.
I think you can, but it has to be more inclusive.
Right.
Not inclusive for the sake of inclusiveness, but like understanding that the landscape has changed, like understanding the bumps and bruises and the ugly parts of our country's history. And I think that's the more intelligent argument that people should be having. And I think people are afraid of that argument. I'm not saying that we should defund the police, but I do believe that I shouldn't worry about my kids driving.
Right.
I'm not saying that. There's a lot of things I'm not saying, but I'm saying there's like, yeah, but with this added to it, right? I do believe that the reason why we have crime is because we suffocate neighborhoods from having opportunity.
Right. Give
them opportunity, and you're not having the same problem.
Right.
I watched this thing about it's called This Is Life with I don't want to butcher her name, but it's a CNN news special. Lisa, I know her first name is Lisa, and it was talking about prostitution. All the arguments of why prostitution is not a bad thing made sense to me. All the scary, like fearful things about prostitution made sense to me. In the middle of those two things is a solution, right? Now, I'm not saying like I'm not pro or anti prostitution, but I'm saying like, yeah, that actually makes sense to me. How is it possible that pornography is legal but prostitution is not legal?
I mean, the fact that you can get a massage on any other part of your body from somebody, which is no problem. But if they touch a specific part of your body, now it's an issue. Like,
So again, not trying to say I'm not advocating for one way or the other.
No, but it is like, right. We're not sitting here saying, man, we wish, prostitution was legal because we'd be out there racking up whores. Like, no. The point is, like,
you can't even call them whores if you're like, you're actually the purveyor of the service.
Yeah. No. Ladies of the night.
The actual term is sex workers. So. And I struggle with that term. I'm like, but okay, it's a job.
It is, yeah. But yeah, like ultimately it's kind of, I mean, like to me it boils down to, oh my God, if it is not ultimately impacting and or hurting you, like why do you care? Like why is it your responsibility to govern what other people are doing with their bodies?
It's very simple. It's super simple to look at the log in somebody else's eye.
It's barely an inconvenience.
Yeah, and just ignore the speck of dust in your own eye, right?
Sure.
where for all intents and purposes should appear to be larger for yourself. We want to, as a society, it's become more prevalent and more PC to identify what's wrong with somebody else as opposed with ourselves. We do it as like individuals, we do it as a country all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's the,
it's deflection, right? I mean, it's but what about this?
Right. Whataboutism has become like our de facto defense to everything.
Yeah.
So I look at it that way. There's a lot of things, and I do believe that, and I'm not advocating racist. I'm not advocating like kidnapping governors of any state. I'm saying
I don't.
I
don't know why you feel compelled to make that argument right now, but
but I will be honest enough to say that I understand. Like I want to take the time to understand what would make somebody feel that these actions are okay.
Right.
And that's the media should do a better job of trying to be impartial. I believe politicians should do a better job of addressing real issues and not fabricating them. And if they're going to even address those issues like CRT, what is it?
Right.
It's no different than John McCain saying, "No, ma'am, stop, please. I know Senator Obama, and he's not a terrorist."
Yeah. It's really like that's the thing that frustrates me is that it took me all of 5 minutes, not even, to do a quick Google search for what is CRT, find it the legal definition, and then a couple of articles that talked about what it is and why people are freaking out about it, and that was enough. Like I didn't need to take a course in critical race theory to understand what the general principle of it is, so. On the whataboutism, something that came to mind that I wanted to share, we can kind of wrap it up after that if you want. I think it was my teacher in 10th and 11th grade history.
So you weren't 7?
No, I wasn't 7. I was...
Okay.
I was... how old was I? I was 16, 17. And it was something we were talking about something, and he brought up Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter had made some statement at some point about like the importance of family and all of that stuff. Even though Jimmy Carter had been divorced at one point in his life, and somebody basically was like, "Well, how can you say that when you yourself are divorced?" And my teacher, I remember saying something to the effect, and I don't know if this is what Jimmy Carter said, but essentially, like, just because the messenger is flawed doesn't mean we should ignore the message.
Right.
And I think that's something that we lose out on a lot these days because we're so quick to judge the messenger. And the moment that we deem them unworthy of our time, the message goes along with it.
That is super wise, and not to actually, I'm going to do it because it's true.
That's fine. Go ahead.
I feel compelled to. There's actually because my faith is very important to me.
Yeah.
Right. So Jesus of Nazareth, he actually had to leave like where he grew up at, where people knew him as a carpenter, because you're not going to listen to the guy that you watch grow up and make mistakes and what have you. So that's very true, right? But with that, you can't also like, I'm starting to believe that people start to like, they tune that out because they feel some type of conviction of what they're doing is wrong. Right.
Sure.
I'm divorced. I talk about family a lot.
Yeah.
My family is my top priority. But I also can say, well, you can't say that because you're divorced. I'm like, yeah, because I made a lot of mistakes. So I can also say that I took notes, right? Remember your wife's birthday. Remember your wife's, remember your anniversary. Those things. So, and I say that jokingly, but it's true. Like we're not designed to be perfect people at any level of our life. So and it's something that we constantly we go back to. It's not about indicting people. It's about being able to understand the other person. Like, it doesn't have to be that complicated. If one of the deepest human desires is to be understood, let's try to spend some more time understanding people. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but just understand the words that are coming out their mouth. So,
okay, Chris Tucker.
I know. I was thinking, like, why don't we have a Chris?
It will be locked and loaded for next week's episode. Trust me.
But, Chris Tucker, I don't know what you're doing right now. Last thing I heard, you were hanging out with Dave Chappelle. But anyway, we're super glad you guys joined us today. Dude, Chris, you're killing it with getting everything published. Now I'm starting to fall behind.
Look. The point is that we are doing this, and we will continue to do it, and we're a team when we do it. This was a kick-ass episode. This might be one of my favorite episodes that we've recorded yet. I don't know why. It just felt like it had everything, and so I'm hoping that everybody else gets to enjoy it as much as I did while we were recording it. But I'm going to try to stay on it. This week I might be a little delayed because I have to travel out of town overnight tomorrow. But I'm gonna see what I can do to try and get that. I've got my routine down, and that's the big thing, like.
Yeah, you're killing me, dog. I'm like, this guy's on point. And I'm over here like, now I'm slacking.
What is it like? You sent me something earlier this week, and you were like, but we got to do this, and I'm like, yeah, but at least I'm publishing episodes like a madman, and you're just like, dude, what? We weren't even talking about that. Why you gotta bring that up now? Like,
I got all distracted. I'm like, he's right. That's why I didn't respond. I was like, he got me. He's straight got me.
Whatever. No, don't let me off the hook like that.
Okay,
I can't do one thing right and be like, so I get to drop the ball on everything else. That's not how that works. You of all people.
I know, but I was so shocked by you. I was like, all right, he got me on that one. So
that's hilarious. I know what works with Andre now.
No, it won't work again. I mean, cat's out of the bag. But you can always catch us on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Google Podcasts, TuneIn. And also, if you go to our website, chrisandandreshow.com, we have a link for our RSS feed. Put it into your favorite RSS reader. I personally use Plex, and I can't say enough about Plex. I'm probably going to write an article about Plex in the future.
You should. Your last tech article did really well.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, I can't remember the guy's name that wrote it. Yes. So thank you. Gosh, now.
I'm sorry. Somebody commented on Andre's DNS article, and I think they've been going back and forth working on some stuff via email. But yeah, that article all of a sudden took off. We should probably talk about that next week on the podcast. We should give a segment to that, to what you discussed in that article, because obviously there's enough interest out there amongst the tech community that's probably decent content. So.
And if you guys didn't know, I'm actually a software developer, so but I have opinions, and I'm not your typical software developer. And I like to write code because it's dope. It's like the ultimate puzzle for me every time I get to bash out some code. And I actually enjoy finding solutions to problems. So yeah, so I probably lean towards writing more technical things, because that's typically where I have a problem, and the secret to that is I don't want to forget it because I'm getting old. But the video version is always going to be available on YouTube, and we really do appreciate comments. And I won't say haters, but people, they don't like stuff, they don't like it, but these are our opinions, and these are, I'm not going to lose sleep because you don't like something. So, get at us.
I might, but he won't, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, because I don't care. I'm always going to say what I think, and I've spent enough time in my life trying to sugarcoat things to make other people feel comfortable. And I really don't care.
Every time we get a negative comment on our video or a downvote, I'm just like,
no! God, please, no!
Sorry, Andre.
Gosh.
I wasn't
I know,
trying to
right?
make you do a spit take.
I know, right? If you're looking for more content, visit our website at chrisandandrashow.com. That's where, I'm going to actually get in the practice of writing more stuff. Again, it will be technical. Developers aren't nerds. Well, I am a nerd.
Yes,
but,
they are. Don't pretend.
But I thug out, though, and I'm not going to front. You can follow us on Facebook at Chris and Andre, on Twitter at Chris and Andre, and always email us at comments at chrisandandrashow.com. I'm Andre at chrisandandrashow.com.
I'm Chris at chrisandandrashow.com. Got to leave that pause in there because for whatever reason, I always seem to catch up to you at the very end of the episode.
We're super glad you joined us. And also, before we leave, I want to say riverside.fm. If you're looking to, this is not an advertisement, but I will say that for the most part, we've been pretty pleased. And as we have issues, their tech support is super responsive. It's well worth whatever we pay.
Anybody that has tuned in the last couple of weeks, maybe 3 episodes, has known or noticed that we've been having issues with the media board. We reported it to this thing is in beta mode, so this is they're still working on it, but
Right.
They got back to us, said that they would alert the development team this week. No problems whatsoever. So Riverside, thank you very much. I'll give you a
Flawless victory.
on that
such an idiot.
for fixing our the one issue that we've really had primarily, other than Andre's technical issues last week, which he has resolved himself, fortunately.
Yeah. Because I got skills, little dog.
So, mad skills.
So we're super glad you joined us. As always, I'm Andre,
And I'm Chris.
and we'll talk to you next time. You're such an idiot, man.
Oh, that's right. I'm the idiot. That's what we're going to have to rename the podcast. Andre and the Idiot.